I was kind of hoping for 20 people. I haven't done this in a long time. A few days ago, I saw a hawk flying with a snake in its talons. In the Native American tradition, this is a symbol of the above and the below, masculine and feminine, the rational and non-rational, a balance of the two. It is, for me, the symbol of life itself. 10 years ago, before I left the church, I was living an extremely rational life. I'd been married in the temple, my husband was a doctor, we had 3 children, I was working for Sunstone, I had a lot of friends, and I was miserable. My life, the way it had been prescribed, was killing me. I weighed about 100 pounds more at the time, too. And so I exploded out of the church and my marriage and onto a very different path. I was looking for God and for myself. Ever since I was a little girl, I have wanted to experience God. I used to go to sleep imagining him. I'd kind of lay in my bed and kind of get farther and farther back, and finally I would scare myself and I'd have to go to sleep. But I always knew that that was what I wanted. I wanted, like Joseph Campbell has said, not to understand the meaning of life, but to experience being alive. And to me, this means to experience or to merge with God. This desire was the reason I left the Lutheran church when I was 18 and I joined the Mormon church. I was sure this would be the path. And in a way it was. Because in leaving the church, to borrow a metaphor from Ram Dass, it was like taking off a really tight shoe. And that enabled me to move in a direction that I didn't even know was possible. When I left the church, I was very angry. Although angry doesn't really say it right. I was in a rage. As far as I could tell, the church was not delivering what I believed it had promised. The way I saw it, the church was full of the masculine, but the feminine was somewhere way out in the margins. There didn't seem to be a place for people to talk about the pain they were in. It felt rigid, erect, and there was no place for comfort, to find comfort, to place to mourn. It just didn't feel right to me. I thought that most people, and for sure most women, felt the same way I did. It never felt like home. The absence of the feminine does not only make a home lonely, but it is damaging to everybody in the house. And as far as I can tell, then and now, there's not a whole lot of embracing the feminine going on in the Mormon church. In fact, there isn't a whole lot of embracing of the feminine going on in the world at large. We live on the feminine, the mother, the earth, who gives us life and embraces us in death. And we are so disconnected that we are trying to kill her and ourselves. So as I said, I left the church in a rage, and I have not looked back. What I did do was look inward. I realized in a dim, far off unconscious way that I was blaming anybody for what was going on with me. My parents, my ex-husband, my friends, the church, and of course God. Anywhere and anyone that was not me. This was a heroic attempt. It took all of my energy to be able to pretend that there was nothing wrong with me. It was a way to hide the pain that I was in. About this time, 2 things happened. I found an incredible therapist, and I began doing Native American ceremonies. Both of these, I believe, were gifts from God. One was rational, the other non-rational. Both were the beginnings of my own shadow work. One of the most important things I saw in ceremonies was just how angry and hurt most people were, and how out of touch they were with the pain they were in. I saw mirrored back to me exactly where I was, and I dimly began to see my own shadow. I identified with the dream that Carl Jung tells in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, where he was in a mighty wind, and there was deep fog flying everywhere. He had his hands cupped around a tiny light, which threatened to go out at any moment. Everything depended on his keeping this little light alive. Suddenly, he had the feeling that something was coming up behind him. He looked behind and saw a gigantic black figure following him. But at the same time, he was conscious, in spite of his terror, that he must keep his little light going, regardless of all the dangers. When he woke up, he realized that the dark figure was his own shadow, which was brought into being by his little light, and that the little light was his consciousness, and the only light he had. His own understanding was the sole treasure he possessed and the greatest. Though infinitely small and fragile in comparison with what it was in the shadows, it was a light, his only light. That, I believe, is true for all of us. Somehow I knew that if I was going to take care of my light, or even see the little light that I had to begin by telling the truth, which was difficult for me because I was so angry, I really couldn't tell what was true for me. I was like pissed off at everything and everybody, and it was so repressed that I didn't know how to reach it. So I started admitting that I was really, well, angry. And this was the beginning. The more truth I told, the more truth was revealed to me. I would go to a ceremony, and then I would bring all of it back to my therapist. And then I would find the language for what was going on inside of me. And I finally understood, on a very deep level, that everything and everyone was a mirror for me. That anyone I blamed for anything was someone holding a piece of myself that I could not. I figured out the more I loved myself, the more I wanted all those pieces back. And back they came. I saw myself more clearly as time went on, positive and negative. And as I took back those pieces of myself, I began to see other people more clearly. Instead of blaming them, I could now be grateful for them for holding a piece of myself, which on some level I could not. I stopped taking everything so personally, and I have faith in the truth. The more ceremonies and therapy I did, the more I felt myself coming to God. Not the God I had imagined when I was a Mormon, the God Levi Peterson talks about in The Backslider, who's looking at you through the barrel of a shotgun, but a loving presence who felt definitely personal. I remember being in a ceremony about 6 years ago, and the medicine man said, "Instinct is prayer." In that moment, I felt something connect for me, an awareness that instinct is a gift, and that I had been cut off from that by simply being part of the culture that I live in. And I knew that I wanted to have the experience of connecting to my instincts. And I began to understand that my life was a prayer, and that I was praying 24 hours a day. I wanted to make conscious intentions. I wanted to be aware that I was always praying. It was during the time of these experiences that I began to feel like Psyche, who first connects with the god Eros without seeing or knowing him. And then upon seeing him in a forbidden moment, her desire is transformed and intensified. But she tragically loses him and is left with only a deep desire to be with him again. In order for her to find her way back to him, she is given mythic tasks to complete. And as she does, there is always somebody or something to help her. This gave me hope, because I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do all by myself, since I too was having glimpses of God, of my Creator, and with a deep longing, I too had to figure out how to get back. And the mythic task in front of me was telling the truth with an awareness that I wasn't always sure how to have, and at the same time knowing that it was the only map available to me. Through the years, like Psyche, I have been and continue to be helped in ways I never thought I would. People show up just in the nick of time. Books come into my hand. Sometimes it's just the right music. I began reading the New Testament again, and this time with new eyes. The words and life of Christ had new meaning. Know the truth, he said, and the truth shall make you free. I saw how often he took the things that people had done in the shadows and brought them into the light, and helped people to know how that they were forgiven. In my experience, the path of truth and forgiveness is the path to freedom. I believe we all need to feel forgiven. I know I do. And I know that the person that I need to forgive the most is myself. So I say thank God for Jesus Christ. And then I discovered Rumi, a Muslim Sufi mystic who died in 1257 and wrote hundreds of love poems to God during his life. And at the end of his life, he said he hadn't said a word, because how can you talk about that which is beyond and before language? Or as Rumi says, the inner secret, that which was never born. His poetry is a marriage of the rational and non-rational. And in this poem that I'm going to read, it's exactly how I felt. All day I think about it. Then at night I say it. Where did I come from? And what am I supposed to be doing? My soul is from elsewhere, I'm sure of that, and I intend to end up there. This drunkenness began in some other tavern. When I get back around to that place, I'll be completely sober. Meanwhile, I'm like a bird from another continent sitting in an aviary. The day is coming when I'll fly off. But who is now in my ear? And who hears my voice? Who says words with my mouth? What is the soul? I cannot stop asking. If I could taste one sip of an answer, I would break out of this prison for drunks. I didn't come here of my own accord, and I can't leave this way. Whoever brought me here will have to take me home. Through his poetry, scripture, and all of my experiences, I began to have a different understanding of love, and it became a verb as well as a noun. I felt God's love, and then my own love for God. I began to see life as a gift. This body that each of us has and is an amazing antenna that connects us to ourselves, others, and that which is greater than each of us. 2 years ago, I was sitting in the West Desert in front of a fire praying. I had what I can only call a vision, and I'm not a person who has visions. But here I was. I wanted to see the face of God. At that moment, I had a glimpse only a glimpse, of how amazingly beautiful God is. In fact, what I felt in that moment was that God was so outrageously beautiful that the only thing it could do was love itself. It also came to me that what I was seeing had created me, that I was part of that incredible beauty. And because it had created me, it loved me as much as it loved itself, because I am itself. I knew that every breath I took, everything I ate, everything that kept me alive was from God. And then it occurred to me that everything around me had been created by that force as well. And if that were true, then everything I saw, every particle in this world was holy. And if that was true, then I needed to walk on this earth and through my life in a different way, with a new awareness, because like Moses, I had to take off my shoes because I was standing on holy ground. But this is a very difficult space to stay in. And I love it when I remember it. But what I know is that it's part of the journey. It has been part of my journey. I have had so many ups and so many downs. And the thing that is the most amazing is I'm so interested. And I think each of us is so interested in our own life. What I love is that I've never been a bit part in somebody else's movie. And I feel like that's the thing that brings me to where I'm going. I am so grateful to God for my life. I am so grateful to God for the experience in this church. I am so grateful to God that I got kicked out. Thank you very much.